You will not do anything about this, and shame on you, because our Jewish community need looking after, and as Mayor of London you are not doing that.
Let's move on to Assembly Member Hall.
Okay, thank you. Morning, Mr. Mayor. I'm discussing the protests. So on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, and on the day of the horrific terror attack in Manchester, pro-Palestinian protesters gathered along Whitehall and the Cenotaph to chant offensive slogans and clap to them, play loud music and wave offensive signs. Protesters gathered at Liverpool Street Station, screaming chants at passing commuters. Protesters could be heard chanting "from the river to the sea" and describing Israel as a terror state. So on the day of the Manchester terror attack, was that behaviour appropriate?
No, I don't think it was. I think it's more to distinguish between what's lawful and what's considerate, mindful and sensitive. And it's worth just spending time talking to Jewish people. You know, there is one state that has a Jewish majority, and many people have an affinity to that who are of the Jewish faith. And on the day when a place of worship, on the Day of Atonement, has been attacked by a terrorist, you can understand, I hope, why Jewish people are feeling frightened. And let's not go to what the law is. I think you use the word appropriate. That's a good word. I don't think it's appropriate, because people are feeling scared and frightened more so than they have, in the recent past. Okay, so do you think that the behaviour of the protesters in Whitehall and at Liverpool Street is anti-Semitic? Well, I can't. You're asking a general question about individuals' behaviour. I think it's insensitive, and I think it's. No. Is it anti-Semitic? No, I don't think marching's anti-Semitic. So you don't think screaming "from the river to the sea" and calling it a terror state is anti-Semitic? Okay. So the members and I extended a question from "is the march anti-Semitic" to now specific phrases of anti-Semitic. Well, the phrase is constantly being used during these hate marches. This is why I'm asking the question. Do you think to scream "from the river to the sea," which they're doing during these hate marches, is appropriate? Do you think it is anti-Semitic? Okay, I don't think it's anti-Semitic, and I think it's all about context. And we had the same conversation, by the way, Chair, a month ago, when the member was arguing that the far right should be allowed to march, and we were having this conversation about Article 10 and freedom of expression. Now, I already said I think it's inappropriate and insensitive on the day of a terrorist attack to have these sorts of marches. Some slogans can be anti-Semitic, but it's all about context. And in certain contexts, yes, those slogans are anti-Semitic. In other contexts, they're not. Well, we will differ on that view. All we ever hear is "from the river to the sea," and we all know what that means, and that is anti-Semitic. You released a statement the day after the protests, and at no point did you criticise the appalling behaviour we saw. You were unequivocal when you were talking about one particular protest last month, claiming that that was far right. Well, so why don't you describe these protests as clearly? Because they're not only plainly wrong, they are anti-Semitic. Look, the difference, I would say, respectfully, between the member and myself is I'm consistent. So the member argues for the right or the far right to protest, but criticises pro-Palestinians. They're not far right. They wave flags like this. That does not make me far right. That makes me very patriotic, actually. So you immediately come down on those, and yet we have had these anti-Semitic comments constantly from these hate marches, and you don't comment on that at all. Last month you said politicians have refused to condemn the rising tide of hatred in this country. So you should be happy to condemn the behaviour we saw at these pro-Palestinian protests. Well, again, we're going to disagree here, because I think Stephen Jackson Lennon is a racist. He's a violent racist, and when he organises a march, it's a far-right march. Isn't it interesting? That is racist. To call people, to say that "from the river to the sea" isn't, of course, no, because perhaps that's coming from a side that should be allowed to say that. To say terror state, perhaps that's allowed as well. It's amazing, isn't it? And yet merely flying a flag, immediately it's far right. I mean, do you actually understand why the Jewish community feels unable to do, as you say, live, work and worship freely without fear of harassment, discrimination, intimidation or violence, when they see the duplicity of your remarks when discussing protests on different sides? Do you not understand why they are so concerned about this? Chair, I've never mentioned flags. I know she's obsessed by flags. I've never mentioned flags. I'm quite clear in relation to what rights were allowed in terms of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, the right to protest, the cornerstone of our democracy. Even when you disagree with what people are protesting about, I will fight to the death the right to protest and the right to march and so forth. Even the right of Stephen Yaxley Lennon, a racist, to march. He's allowed to do so.
Mr. Mayor, look, you are the mayor of this wonderful city. Does it not worry you that there is one community that has to lock its children in schools for their safety? There is one community that can't come into London because of their listening to chants like "From the River to the Sea," where they're looking at Palestinian flags and hostility towards them. Do you not see that in London, to have one community that is so badly disadvantaged by what is going on with these anti-Semitic chants, that you, as mayor of this great city, should do something about that?
Chair, I've got to be clear in my remarks in relation to my concern about the fear, the increased fear Jewish Londoners and Jewish people across the globe are feeling after the events of last Thursday. I've gone out of my way since October the 7th, 2023, to reassure Jewish Londoners and Jewish people across the country and across the...
But they don't feel reassured. How can they feel reassured?
Member,
But
there's a number of interruptions now that you're making. I understand the point
mainly
you tried
because
to
he's
get
not
across.
listening, Chair.
But
He's
he might
not
not be
listening
but
and
you
he's
can't-
not understanding.
But you can't keep interrupting. You have to allow him to answer in the way that he does, and then you can come back again. No one will object to that.
I tell you what,
Yeah.
I'll finish here because you will not do anything about this, and shame on you, because our Jewish community need looking after, and as Mayor of London, you are not doing that. My time is up, Chairman. Thank you.
A London official just looked the mayor straight in the eye and said, "Shame on you." What happened next exposed a debate tearing the city apart, and it's about to get a whole lot worse. October 9th, 2025, London. The Jewish Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the holiest day on the Jewish calendar. It's also the anniversary of the Manchester Arena bombing, one of Britain's deadliest terror attacks.
22 people died that day.
22 families shattered forever. And on that exact day, pro-Palestinian protesters flooded the streets of central London. Thousands gathered along Whitehall and the Strand. Chants of "From the River to the Sea" echoed off government buildings. Demonstrators blocked Liverpool Street Station, confronting morning commuters with megaphones, drums, and signs labeling Israel a terror state. Loud music, offensive slogans, a carnival of rage. On a day when Jewish families were supposed to be in prayer. But most Jewish Londoners weren't at synagogue that day. They stayed home. Parents locked their children inside schools, too afraid to let them walk the streets. One community paralyzed by fear. And what the Mayor of London said when confronted about this is exactly why this footage is going viral right now. If you want more unfiltered political confrontations the media won't show you, hit that subscribe button because you're going to want to see how this ends. Inside London City Hall, Assembly member Susan Hall sat across from Mayor Sadiq Khan. And she wasn't there to be polite. Mr. Mayor, on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, and on the anniversary of the Manchester terror attack, pro-Palestinian protesters gathered in Whitehall to chant offensive slogans, wave offensive signs, and scream at Jewish families. Protesters at Liverpool Street Station were heard chanting "From the River to the Sea" and calling Israel a terror state. She paused, then delivered the question. Was that behavior appropriate? The mayor shifted in his seat. I think we need to distinguish between what's lawful and what's considerate, mindful, and sensitive. It's worth spending time talking to Jewish people. There is one state that has a Jewish majority, and many people have an affinity to it. On a day when a place of worship is attacked by a terrorist, you can understand why Jewish people are feeling frightened. He continued, let's not go into what the law is. I just don't think it's appropriate because people are feeling scared and frightened, more so than in the recent past. Hall wasn't satisfied. So, do you think the behavior of the protesters in Whitehall and at Liverpool Street was anti-Semitic? The mayor hesitated. I can't answer a general question about individuals' behavior. I think it was insensitive. No, Hall interrupted. Is it anti-Semitic? I don't think marching is anti-Semitic. So, you don't think screaming from the river to the sea and calling Israel a terrorist state is anti-Semitic? The tension in the room was suffocating. The mayor leaned forward. The phrase is constantly being used during these marches. You're asking me if specific phrases are anti-Semitic. I don't think from the river to the sea is inherently anti-Semitic. It's all about context. Hall's voice sharpened. We will differ on that view. All we ever hear is from the river to the sea, and we all know what that means. That phrase calls for the elimination of Israel. That is anti-Semitic. She pulled out a printed statement. You released a statement the day after these protests, and at no point did you criticize the appalling behavior we saw. But last month, when there was a different protest, one you didn't agree with, you were unequivocal. You called it far-right. You condemned it immediately. The mayor tried to respond, but Hall wasn't done. Why don't you describe these protests clearly? Because they're not only plainly wrong, they are anti-Semitic. The mayor's tone hardened. The difference between you and me, respectfully, is that I'm consistent. You argue for the right of far-right groups to protest, but you criticize pro-Palestinians. I'm quite clear about freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and the right to protest. The tension inside London City Hall was electric. Every word between Susan Hall and Mayor Sadiq Khan carried the weight of fear, frustration, and divided loyalty. The mayor defended the protests as part of democracy's foundation, the right to speech, the right to march, but to the Jewish community, those marches weren't just speech. They were echoes of centuries-old hate, returning to the streets of their own city. Susan Hall wasn't there to debate law, she was there to talk about humanity. Her words sliced through the mayor's careful diplomacy. You should be happy to condemn hatred, she said. So, why don't you? The silence that followed was deafening. And then came the moment that set social media ablaze. The mayor brought up Tommy Robinson, a known far-right agitator, labeling him a violent racist. But Hall wasn't asking about Tommy Robinson. She was asking about Jewish fear. Her face hardened. Isn't it interesting, she said, that calling someone a racist is acceptable but saying from the river to the sea isn't? The room shifted.
Gasps.
A statement like that in the heart of London's political chamber wasn't just a question, it was an accusation. Hall was pointing to what many Londoners feel but rarely say aloud, that the moral rules change depending on who's speaking. Then came the question that silenced the room. Mr. Mayor, Hall said, do you understand why the Jewish community feels unsafe? Why they lock their children in schools? Why they're afraid to walk their own streets? You could feel the desperation in her voice. This wasn't political theater anymore. This was a cry from a community that feels abandoned. The mayor's answer was calm, deliberate but cold. He spoke of rights and freedoms, of consistency and legal definitions. But none of it touched the pain that hung in the air. Hall cut in again, furious now. They don't feel reassured, she snapped. How can they feel reassured when you won't even call hate by its name? The chair tried to intervene. Member, you must allow him to answer, but it was too late. The emotion had boiled over. Hall's voice shook with conviction as she rose slightly from her seat. You will not do anything about this, she declared. Shame on you. Shame on you, because our Jewish community needs looking after. And as Mayor of London, you are not doing that. Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. Even the mayor didn't speak. In that frozen moment, London's political divide was laid bare. One side defending principle, the other pleading for protection. It wasn't about left or right anymore. It was about who feels safe in the city they call home. What happened in that chamber wasn't just a debate, it was a mirror. A reflection of a London struggling to reconcile its ideals with its realities. A city where free speech collides with fear. Where one community's protest is another's trauma. And where the people meant to lead can't even agree on what hatred looks like. So, here's the question for you. Is from the river to the sea an anti-Semitic chant? Or can context truly erase centuries of meaning? Are we watching political courage or political cowardice unfold right before our eyes? Because sometimes refusing to choose a side is the choice. If you believe this debate matters, if you think leaders should protect all communities, not just the convenient ones, then share this video. Let's start the conversation they're too afraid to have. This isn't just about London. It's about every place where silence has become safer than truth.